And you, and you, and you, and you were there. Some of it wasn't very nice, but most of it was beautiful.
Hello, hello, hello.
Howdy.
How are you?
I'm doing well, recovering from our pre-recording discussions that have got us turned us into a couple little giggle pusses.
So. Yes, it's a very good thing that listeners don't listen to the part that we don't record.
That's true.
I mean, one day maybe we'll have some outtakes or something, but probably not. That would not bode well for us.
No, we would be excommunicated immediately from everything.
Yes, indeed. Well, welcome back. We are here again.
This is Dream Idiots.
That's Mo.
That's
I'm
Brian.
Yep, I'm Brian. And you can now find us on pretty much every platform. And folks have been finding us happily, it looks like. So we're getting some downloads and getting some feedback. So keep on at it. Please rate and subscribe when you get a chance and let us know what you think. And I'm going first, I think.
Yes, sir.
Because I'm even and you're odd, right? No offense.
Wait, what?
Right. So two super quick updates that I'm not sure whether you saw this or not. First of all, birds aren't real. So I was watching, innocently enough, the UNC Kansas NCAA men's final recently, back toward the first of the month. And there was this college kid. I'd never heard of birds aren't real before, 5 weeks ago. And during that broadcast, there's a great big poster that says birds aren't real being held up behind Charles Barkley's head. Like, well, okay, there it is. There's evidence of it. I'd never heard it before, and there it is. And then someone that we have in common, a former prof of ours who listens to this show, posted online the fact that the whole birds aren't real movement is a joke. It's not a real conspiracy. It's kind of a conspiracy on a conspiracy. It's a meta conspiracy. This college age kid came up with an idea. I'm gonna put out this completely nonsensical horseshit theory and see if I can get crazy right-wing crackpots that are QAnon types to follow it. And it worked. It's all complete nonsense. And so they're actually having birds aren't real movements. There actually is the other thing I saw about, there's a birds aren't real billboard in Williamson County, not far from where I live. But this college kid just came up with it. It's all nonsense, but QAnon types are actually following it.
So I don't know if is that a good thing? I don't.
It's peculiar. It's funny. It kind of feels a little bit dangerous. Like
it feels very dangerous.
Yeah. What can I get people to believe? I mean, after Pizzagate and that whole sex scandal thing, that, which is just Google Pizzagate if you haven't heard Pizzagate. It's way bonkers than birds aren't real. But yeah, it's kind of funny, but it also feels a little bit like kind of gross.
Well, it gets back to our the episode on Hadley Cantrell and critical thinking skills and how people approach media messages. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, kind of scary.
Another one was the Alex Murdaugh story. South Carolina attorney and well-known piece of shit, Alex Murdaugh. The family of Mallory Beach is the young woman who lost her life by virtue of this idiot turd son, I guess. The criminal investigation apparently couldn't find the video surveillance from his house the night his wife and son were murdered, but apparently as part of the civil action, some video footage has been obtained that implicate him. So, I mean, this guy's he's toast either way, but he's now doubly toast. Apparently there is video evidence, quote unquote, that implicates him. Bye, Alex.
And this came up in the civil suit from Melanie Beach's family.
Apparently,
okay. Yeah. And she was the young lady killed on the river with
killed on the boat. Right. So, I mean, obviously, he was done either way. Going to jail for a very long time. I guess, death penalty. I don't know, but this guy's done.
Well,
no loss.
I can't say I feel terribly bad. So.
Oh no, yeah.
Well, I feel horrible. I feel absolutely horrible for the Beach family and the families whose lives have been destroyed by this man. But
yeah.
Perhaps justice will be served.
One would hope. Okay, so for my story, this isn't really a story. We're going to kind of review some scientific data here in the field of psychology. So there's a guy named Michael Slepian. He's a distinguished prof at Columbia in the School of Psychology. And so my question for you, Mo, is do you want to know a secret?
One of my favorite Beatles songs. Go ahead.
So basically what this prof and his team started to dive into was this perception that having a secret, maintaining a secret, is burdensome. People always say when they share a secret that a weight has been lifted, and so he was trying to wrap his brain around their brains around this notion of there must be sort of a physiological component to maintaining secrets, and so did this fairly extensive survey of folks, had 2,000 respondents, and after they culled through all this data, they figured out there were, in their estimation, there were 38 categories of secrets, which seems to me to be way too many. It's probably like 5, maybe 10. But on average, the average person had 13 secrets, 5 of which they had never shared with anyone ever. So if you want to go ahead and tell us one of yours, that's fine.
One time, one summer,
right. So as part of his research, I mean, so the average person carries 13 secrets, 5 of which are so uncomfortable or are so rife with embarrassment or would create a conflict that people are unwilling to share them. The further research, the more he got into it, the more it was revealed that some secrets can be good. You can create a bond if you know something that another person does not, or an off-color joke, or some insight, or you're planning a surprise birthday party for someone. You and I might plan something that is for someone else that is an innocent secret, but it's still a secret that requires some level of, playing things close to the chest, or maybe hiding some things a little bit for a positive reason. But obviously, what was clear in this research is that many of these secrets are quite burdensome. I mean, this is an example where the English language actually does a good job of reflecting the reality of the situation, because people have referred to secrets as being burdensome for decades, maybe centuries.
Sure.
It's an absolutely spot on, spot on analysis. So folks that are in this pool of respondents, definitely, of those that sort of subjectively indicated they were carrying heavier secrets, there was a direct correlation with physical activity. So some of them were asked to basically play cornhole, and those that did would consistently overshoot the hole. When asked to appraise the height or severity of a walk up a hill, it was always much harder and much further, would require much more work, and they didn't want to do it. And those that were more free and light and didn't carry secrets, didn't have these same issues. The research sort of further revealed that if you were an introvert, it was more likely that these issues would be problematic for you. If you had more time in your hands to be introspective and think about the thing the secret that you were carrying, it became more front of mind and became more of a problem. If you're more of an extrovert or had some crazy busy life, you're much more able to sort of set it aside and have it not be something that was problematic. And then folks that tested, if you're narcissistic and self-involved, it's pretty easy to set some secrets aside because you don't care about the feelings of others, and so it's pretty easy to set aside. So, but all this stuff was, essentially completely subjective. And so other researchers at other schools, kind of dove into this as well and started doing some research on their own. And it turns out that many of them had a hard time sort of replicating these initial findings. And what seems to have turned out to be the case is that there is a sort of a subtle distinction between having a secret and maintaining the secret, I guess. This is the thing when I was reading this stuff, it's kind of hard to understand what that meant. And the best example I could sort of come up with is that if you are a diehard lefty Biden voter and you come from a family of Trumpers, you might choose to live a long way away from them, so you don't have to deal with them. Being in close proximity to them and then having to pretend like you're also a Trumper is when that secret becomes burdensome to you. But if you're able to set it aside and not have to, actively in a front of mind sort of way conceal this, it becomes much easier to bear. So I thought that was sort of an interesting, very, very subtle distinction. But in the scope of secrets and things that are maintained, I mean, you and I both listen to, I know, a variety of other podcasts that talk about true crime and those types of things, and there are just tons and tons of them where some awful crime has transpired, and invariably someone calls their family member to come help them deal with a dead body or something, and they do it. And I think criminologists indicate that this is the case, or those in law enforcement, that when they have folks that have committed a crime, the second they admit the crime, if they're in custody, the moment they admit, they acknowledge the crime and indicate what they've done, they then relax a whole bunch and put their head down on the table and fall asleep.
Sure.
Yeah, but prior to that, they're angsty and they're pumped up. So it's just an interesting little combination of things out there that secrets are definitely a mixed blessing. And I, for one, I when reading this, I kind of actively thought through, like, what things have I been told over the years that do I have 5 big, deep, dark secrets? I don't think so. There have been a couple occasions where people were like started to tell me something. I'm like, no, you don't want to tell me that because I won't keep your secret. Because I flat refuse to do so. But it's interesting little field of study that I thought was interesting and worthy of sharing.
It also kind of harkens back to like common folk wisdom. This idea of a trouble shared is a trouble halved. We've heard that saying before.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, yes. That's exactly it. Right.
Yeah. And you also see it like, think of the exodus of folks who were forced to live in the closet, say, and their exodus to New York and San Francisco.
Right.
Not having to keep that secret anymore. That is very interesting in terms of like this idea of, I guess, keeping a secret versus, how did you phrase it? Keeping versus maintaining?
Yes, basically. See, I mean, that's a perfectly apt example. So if you're gay and you're living out in Austin, Texas, and your family back in Topeka or in wherever thinks you're straight, maybe you go back once every 18 months and you kind of smile and nod when Uncle so and so says, "Hey, why haven't you found a girl yet?" Right, and you can kind of blow it off. Well, I just haven't found the one yet, because because it's a secret that they are not going to be able to tolerate. And so you create that physical distance from that conflict, and hopefully you're able to have maintain a quality of life by maintaining that distance. But if you're in the weeds every day facing that type of internal conflict, it seems pretty clear that there would be a direct negative biological impact on your body. I mean, like, would your life expectancy go down because of it? Seems like it would have to, because the
hike up the hill will be a hike up the hill as opposed to being able to casually walk up the hill.
Right. I mean, everything is harder. Everything's more burdensome. Your blood pressure has to be higher. Your cortisol has to be high. I mean, everything. I mean, everything goes wonky, probably. I mean, obviously, I'm not a doctor. I'm not claiming to be, but it's just interesting that there is such a direct, at least subjective connection among these folks.
And I do know that as someone who has struggled with, say, from my own experience of, it's probably not a secret to people, but admitting something to everyone out loud that you've known to yourself, it's the first step in a road to addressing the issue and to healing. And by healing, I mean not necessarily solving the problem or fixing something, but healing the trauma of having kept that secret for so long. Right? Like,
right, sure.
I'm pretty open about my problems with alcohol. I don't drink anymore. And the relief it was when I realized that, oh, I can tell people, hey, I don't drink anymore. Here's why.
Right,
and right. I still have people from way back who are like, hey, you want a beer? It's like, you've known me for how long?
Right. You might recall that I don't do that anymore.
You might recall that for almost 20 years, I've not done this. And, you know, it's a world of difference between struggling with that every day and being able to have it out in the open and discuss it. And yeah, I would say physiologically, sure, you feel better. I mean,
yeah,
you almost have to. The connection, the mind-body connection is extremely powerful.
Right. And you know, and when you're also potentially carrying a secret for someone else, I mean, you know, take you with alcohol. So, you know, I don't recall the occasion when you told me that, but I mean, that's a good example of something that if someone, you know, if when you told me that, I don't recall having this mental thought process because I hadn't read this material, but when you're carrying what is someone else's information for them that is not your information to share, then you're a little bit at a juxtaposition. You know, your motivations are at cross purposes because you feel an allegiance to maintain the relationship and the connection to that friend because you can't share the information that's been passed on to you. But part of you probably wants to share that information because you know, you've now been handed a burden that you don't want to carry. Right.
Right. And it could come down to, quite frankly, just an ethical consideration of, well, I've got two things I believe in. One is helping people, and two is keeping people's information private. Holy crap. I've got a situation where if I sacrifice one for the other, you know, I've got to sacrifice one of these two goods that I believe in. You know,
right, exactly.
The categorical imperative, I think Kant would call it. I could be wrong on that, but yeah, that's a rough one, man. And I also like the difference between what's a secret and what's a mystery, but that's for another
time. Right.
Yeah. That's fascinating stuff. And I love the social psychology and psychological elements of that. That's fascinating stuff.
And it also turns out that there must be a pretty clear benefit that if you're a raving narcissist, life must be much easier, you know, because you just don't give a shit, right?
Well, if you lack empathy, secrets don't matter, right? I mean,
exactly.
Secrets don't matter. Feelings don't matter. Consequences don't matter. Other people's pain doesn't matter.
Right.
So
yes,
good thing we don't see that today. Good thing we've evolved past that.
Yeah. Never. That's a 1 in a billion. Anyway, so there you have it. So when someone says to you, "Hey, can I tell you a secret?" Yeah, just think twice about the problem you're about to be faced with.
Is this going to require me getting on a stand at some point in the future?
Right. Am I Exhibit A? Oh shit, that's not a good sign.
Thanks, Brian. That was a good one.
All right. So along in a similar, a slightly related way, we do have this week the Dream Idiots curse word of the week.
It is time for the Dream Idiots curse word of the week.
All right.
And it's not really connected, but it is drawn quickly from another psychological study. So the curse word of the week this week is asshole. So there was another study I found. It was published in Collaborative Psychology. And basically, I just love the fact that someone spent time and money doing a study like this. They had 400 respondents, and they basically sought to determine in scientific terms precisely what an asshole is. So what does that mean? How is someone deserving of this title? What are the sort of common personality traits that assholes share? And basically what they found is assholes have low agreeableness, and high anger. And the average asshole was seen to be impulsive, irresponsible, self-centered, and bigoted. Bigoted. I'm not sure. I'm not sure all assholes are necessarily have to be bigoted, but that isn't, it's not necessarily exclusive. But and according to this study, the typical asshole, if there is such a thing, is a middle-aged man and is either a current or probably former romantic partner, a friend, family member, a boss, or coworker. And if you're listening to this thinking now, oh my God, wait, am I the asshole? Just the fact that you are asking yourself that question means that you're probably not the asshole, because assholes know that they are assholes. And they don't care that they upset other people. And as we were just mentioning, they're probably pretty narcissistic. And they don't mind being an asshole. It's part of their persona.
Well, they probably wouldn't even call themselves an asshole.
Right.
Because they're a straight shooter. They're a take no prisoner kind of person.
I tell it like it is. Fuck you. Right.
Have you read the book? I can't think of the, it's way over on my shelf over there, so I'm not going to go get it, but there's a book called Assholes, a Theory.
No, I have not.
I highly recommend it. It's
Okay.
I can't think of the guy's name, but it's along the same lines of what you're talking about, that how do we define this personality trait that allows us to label someone asshole? And it's the best, if you had to phrase it up, I think in one good succinct thing, is an aggressive lack of self-awareness.
That's
right.
Perfect, actually. Yeah.
Just like, well, let me tell you one thing, and here's another thing, and just,
yeah.
I don't know.
Or in the words of I forget which comedian it is. It may have been a Groucho Marx bit, but the asshole is the person that rambles on and on about themselves and then says, "But enough about me. Let's talk about you. What do you think of me?" Right. Right.
Yeah. What do you think about me?
Right.
All right. It's a great word. It's a word that I've used a lot. George Carlin has a good bit about asshole. So a lot of great thinkers have looked at that word. I'll have to look up that book, Assholes, a Theory, and we'll put a link to it on the website at some point, because it speaks to exactly what you're talking about. All right. Good word. Are we ready for my story?
We are. Lay it on me.
Okay. Brian, quick question for you as I start all my stories off. What were you doing? Be specific. Be specific. March 20th, 1980.
March 20th, 1980.
It was a Thursday, if that helps.
I was 10 years old. I was probably mowing the lawn or playing basketball outside, or 1980.
Well, I can tell you where you weren't.
Okay.
I'll bet that you weren't in downtown San Antonio. And I'll bet you weren't a member of the May Day Brigade.
You're right on both points.
Which is a Maoist organization. And your name was probably not on that day Damian Garcia, Abigail Bayer, or Hayden Steele Fisher. These three folks scaled the walls of the Alamo, tore down the United States and Texas flags, and replaced them with their own communist worker flags as a campaign to celebrate May 1st, or May Day, celebrated in many parts of the world to recognize labor forces. Now, this is different from Labor Day that we celebrate here in the States. President Grover Cleveland, preferred a September holiday so as not to confuse the socialist roots of May Day with American values. America actually celebrates two non-official holidays, and I did not know this till I looked into this, both on May 1st, as opposed to celebrating May Day, something called Law Day, where we talk about how important laws are to our society. It was declared by Eisenhower in 1958 and affirmed in 1961. And Loyalty Day, which has been around since 1921 and affirmed in 1958. So both part of the Eisenhower administration. Now, why is this important in terms of the Alamo? Well, if we think about the Alamo, for those of you who aren't from Texas or from the States, the Alamo was a Catholic mission set up by Spanish explorers to help Christianize local natives in what would become South Texas, in the South Texas area, right? And it was part of a mission chain that includes some really beautiful old buildings: Mission San Jose, Mission Concepcion, Mission San Juan de Capistrano, Mission Espada, and Mission San Antonio de Valero, also known as the Alamo. And I'm sure that you had to go on these field trips as a kid to these various
dozens
missions.
of times.
Right. And you can do the mission trail today, and I highly recommend it if you're in San Antonio. But the Alamo then in 1836 became the site of one of the great battles of the, depending on how you look at it, either the War of Texas Aggression or the War for Texas Independence, where the Texas or Texican Army held off the Mexican Army for 13 days to allow Sam Houston in the East to prepare his forces for the final battle at San Jacinto, where Texas gained its independence in 1836. Now, you all know all this growing up in Texas, but the Alamo is an important part of San Antonio culture and Texas culture. Now, while the Maoists were down there on March 20th, 1980, they also dropped leaflets. And allow me to read to you from one of these leaflets of what they said. Beautiful sound of book opening. We remember as it has stood for over 100 years as a monument to the tiny handful of parasites who have sucked the blood of the Chicano people, driving them into the ground, destroying their language and culture, and trying to force them to live on their knees. We remember it as touched off the bloody invasion of Mexico by the US and the theft of the entire state of Texas. We remember it as it has been used to fill the head of every child in Texas and across the country with reactionary fables of Davy Crockett and Daniel Boone, so-called freedom fighters who were nothing but hired guns for the slave-owning class, and we spit on their graves. That's pretty strong stuff. Perhaps not inaccurate, depending on your historical perspective as to
Absolutely
what the Alamo
not.
stands for.
Right.
One of the conflicts that arises from this is the idea that the Texas Army was fighting on behalf of a group of people who wanted slavery to be legal. Slavery was against the Mexican Constitution of 1824, even though General Santana of Mexico had declared most of the Constitution, I believe, invalid at the time. I'm not sure how that plays into the slavery angle of that. But that's a heck of a thing to say in 1980 at the Alamo, something that has come to stand for so much for Texas. The three Maoists were arrested and released on $1,000 bond for, quote, desecration of a venerated object. Now, later in that year in April, Garcia was stabbed to death in Los Angeles while handing out party leaflets. And Fisher and Bayer eventually stood trial in June. The desecration charge was dropped. Fisher was tried by himself and found guilty of disturbing the peace. He was fined $200, or she was fined $200. He was fined $200. Bayer and the other three Maoists who were in the crowd were charged with disorderly conduct. The fact that they were outsiders was almost as important as the fact that they were communists. The DA, a guy by the name of Ed Falla, said, "I don't think we need people from California or Oregon coming in here telling us what to do." Now, flash forward 2 years later. On May 2nd of 1982, there's a certain group that was arrested while the city was getting ready to celebrate Cinco de Mayo. And Cinco de Mayo is one of those holidays that a lot of people celebrate and get drunk and have fun with and have no idea what it means. And this group of people said that they were there to guard the Alamo against possible communists who might be celebrating May Day. And May Day and Cinco de Mayo are awfully close together, right?
Right.
Cinco de Mayo celebrates Mexican victory over French forces. This group that was protecting the Alamo were members of the KKK.
Ugh.
In 1983, a year later, the KKK was denied a marching permit for May Day. They came back a year later to defend the Alamo. The city argued that a planned art show in Alamo Plaza plus the Klan would make for horrible congestion in the downtown area. I cannot imagine a confluence of an art show and the Klan mingling together. They accepted an alternate route, which was well away from the general public. The title of the article that covered this was, "They threw a parade and nobody came." Again, reading from an original source. Oh, listen to that beautiful sound of pages turning. Here's what the Ku Klux Klan Grand Dragon said. If we, the Klan, don't get a permit to march, we'll just be tourists that day. We basically want to do is make sure that nobody messes with the Alamo. We'll just be going as individual American citizens. We don't want any communist trash like that messing with the Alamo. Basically, you have a city manager here that has no idea what the Constitution of the United States stands for. We have a legal right to march with police protection or without. We are not any legal group, and we are not violent. We came down here as an anti-communist group. And the KKK pretty much took it on the nose that day. Again, from an original source, this time an editorial called "Keep KKK Away from the Alamo." We have bad news for the Ku Klux Klan. The San Antonio Police Department can defend the Alamo from anyone, including communists. We don't need the KKK to be our watchdog. In fact, the KKK at the Alamo would be a sacrilege. The KKK stands for all the repugnant things that the heroes of the Alamo did not: bigotry, hate, narrow minds, and anti-patriotism. The Alamo is a religious shrine, and the KKK is anything but an organization of God. We offer no apology for our dislike of the Klan. It is an organization that uses Americanism wrongfully, even though we realize that the Constitution of the United States gives the KKK the right to spew its prejudice over the streets of San Antonio. Every effort should be made to assure that this repulsive group does not take over the facilities which belong to correct thinking, tolerant American citizens. Okay. So they tried several other public displays the KKK did over the years, and they were usually met with jeering crowds, people with signs, KKK stay away, go play somewhere else. As a coda to this, at least in 1983, there was another group with a local agenda that appeared on the scene. It wasn't really related to the Alamo site, but a local nudist organization wanted to parade downtown on the same day as the Klan in order to protest against the Klan's uniforms. The leader of the organization called the Klan's robes and other regalia obscene, saying they symbolize racism, murder, lynchings, and the violence of the Klan's past. This march was canceled due to legal problems, proving once again, and this is quoting from the source, not the article, that the community standards can restrict the use of the First Amendment. And the Klan had another plan, a defense of the Alamo March plan in '84, but they canceled it and moved it to Houston in order to protest, quote, against homosexuality.
Right.
So as a launching place for discussion of what the Alamo is, I guess my thing here, what I'm trying to get at is, here's a place that's a historical artifact, right? The Alamo is a social place. Is it a symbol of white imperialism? Is it a symbol of liberty? Can it be both at the same time? And let's go back even further. Why can't we call it a symbol of the oppression of the native peoples of Texas, the Caddo and the Kickapoo
Absolutely.
and the other native folks who were there before the Spanish explorers came? It's what I would call, I guess, a negotiated social place. And the fact that we discuss it every year, it seems like something like this comes up. May 31st of 2020, the Alamo Cenotaph was vandalized. This was the same cenotaph. We talk about this story that Ozzy Osbourne peed on the Alamo. He didn't pee on the Alamo. He peed on the cenotaph, which is the statue outside the Alamo, the big carving. The, quote, Texas Freedom Force stood guard over the cenotaph. Graffiti with the words "white supremacy, profit over people" had appeared on the cenotaph. And there's some great YouTube videos of this. In April of 2020, right before it was vandalized, the police patrolled Alamo grounds after the Texas Land Commissioner, George P. Bush, had been monitoring social media, noting that there was going to be some protests at the Alamo. So I'm amazed that this little building in the center of our hometown is so many things to so many people. And when it comes to questioning the dominant history of what that little building does, I mean, it goes back hundreds and hundreds of years, and it is still questioned to this day. And I think that's what we do in a healthy society, is question what things mean. And the fact that you can get up as a KKK member and say what you want, hey, good. But it doesn't mean that you are immune from criticism, right? And
Exactly,
that's what we forget. And that's what's being forgotten today, that your right to say what you mean does not mean that you have the right to be free from someone coming in and saying, no, you're full of shit.
Right.
And
exactly. Yeah.
we absolutely have the right to call you on your crap. I've got some sources for this, but I'll just run through some sources real quick. Most of these come from the good old San Antonio Light, the long lost San Antonio Light, which went out of business in 1992. Cahill and Sharp's Alamo Jeers Klansmen, Davison's Klan Foes Chuck Clothes, Davison and Woods Klan Vows to Guard the Alamo, Rial and Obregon Alamo Maoist found guilty, Siskin Woods Protest Abuse of Chicanos, Woods Alamo Invaders released. Also some uncredited articles. Alamo Maoists slain in LA, bed sheets on parade, keep KKK away from the Alamo, KKK to march against homosexuals. Cody King on ksat.com, May 30th, 2020, an online article. KPCRradio.iheart.com, June 15th, article by Ken Webster Jr., a YouTube video of the San Antonio riot defending the Alamo 2020, published on May 31st, 2020. Excuse me. And my own master's thesis, Remembering the Alamo, Social Energy and the Construction of Place, from 1998. This has long been a fascination of mine, our little building in downtown San Antonio.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean that story got so much press because the past couple of years, I think both Dan Patrick and Greg Abbott came out. There's a book that came out that basically, I think accurately portrayed, Jim Bowie, Davy Crockett. These are the heroes of the Texas, of Texas history, right? And it turns out they're flawed individuals, many of whom owned slaves or may have been pro-slavery, earlier in their life. And Patrick, I know Patrick just blew a gasket about this being taught, and it's the same ridiculous argument that politicians in Texas and then Ron DeSantis, I know in Florida, is having a fucking embolism over critical race theory. It's just history. It's why is this a problem? It's free speech. It's stuff that needs to be taught in the classroom. We're not trying to make little Bobby feel guilty for the fact that he's white. This is just part of history. So why is this hard? And it seems like there will always be folks that want to intentionally skew things in their favor, like history is a competition. I don't get it. It's definitely very peculiar that people will fight over these icons and try to claim, oh, it's mine. No, it's mine. Well, it's both. The truth is always in the middle.
And I think as long as we continue to have these discussions in a civilized way, we're doing all right, because it's at least an acknowledgement that, okay, there's something going on here we need to talk about. I think the big winners in this, are the folks and the companies who get to use the word Alamo
right
in their corporate branding. And we can think of many businesses in San Antonio that use Alamo because it has become a corporate.
Sure.
I mean, the Alamo Dome, for Christ's sakes, right? I mean, the last home team that played at the Alamo lost. So I'm not sure why you would name your stadium.
They lost by a lot.
Yeah. But beside the point, I mean, you can go to the Alamo, and I still do when, I took my sons there. There is a feeling there when you're there because you know that you're standing on history.
Right. Sure.
And that's a complex history. It's not an easy to tell history. It's a difficult history. History, you said it's just history. It's just history is correct. And history is very complicated, right? I mean, it can get very, very complicated. And I'm speaking as a non-historian. I'm speaking as just someone who grew up with all these legends and wanted to know more about them. And I just find, I love the fact that when I brought up the KKK, you just rolled your eyes. That right. Suddenly all these people who've been defending the Alamo vocally against the communists were now like, well, the KKK agrees with us. We shouldn't have communists. Well, that's not right.
Right. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. I mean, history and conflict, happily and repeatedly creates strange bedfellows, right? And so, be careful who you want to have on your side. And, again, look at anything like, for instance, just the Civil War. I mean, when you look at that conflict, how that conflict and how it is portrayed through history after the fact, folks from the South, many of them will happily tell you that the Civil War had nothing to do with slavery.
It was all states' rights. Yeah.
Right. It was all
the great lost cause.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Yeah. No representation. You're just taxing us and taking advantage of us. And the slaves had nothing to do with it. That's complete bunk. So when the KKK is involved or nudists are involved, you can roll your eyes, unless they're nude KKKists, in which case I'm all for it. But
the best pop culture representation I've ever seen on this, I even hesitate to call it pulp culture, is a film I really, really like called Lone Star. Have you ever seen it? But directed by John Sayles. Chris Cooper, the late Elizabeth Pena's in it. Yeah. Really fantastic film. Matthew McConaughey, it's one of his first big films, but it's set in this fictional town in South Texas. And there's this great, I think it's a school board meeting where they're fighting over the meaning of certain things. And it's basically, they're essentially fighting over what some people are calling critical race theory.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
It's not critical race theory, but it's what people are calling critical race theory. And there's this great scene where this guy says, we needed Texas to be independent so you could make a fortune in the cotton business. And people don't like to hear that there are economic underpinnings for liberty, right? Or independence.
Right.
And I don't know. It's something I think about often. And I haven't thought about this Alamo piece in a long time, but I've wanted to cover it because, I spent time writing my thesis and I've always wanted to do something with some of the chapters in it. And this was one on it, the day that the communists tried to take over the Alamo. So there we go.
Oh, that's awesome. Nice job.
Thanks.
Well, I think we wrapped another one. Thanks for listening, folks. We will be back again soon. Check out dreamidiots.com and let us know what you think.
Yep. Sounds good. Have a good week, everybody.
Bye.